The mountain man, with shoulders like canyon walls, stepped into the dusty street of Great Bend, Kansas, just as the young woman knelt before a barefoot child. Unlacing her own worn leather shoes in the scorching August heat of 1876. Vincent Whitmore had come down from the Rockies with a season's worth of pelts and enough loneliness weighing on his broad frame to crush a lesser man. His dark hair hung past his shoulders, sun-streaked and wind-tangled, and his muscular arms carried supplies he had just purchased from the general store. He stopped mid-stride, watching the scene unfold with eyes the color of pine forests. The woman's name was Violet Nelson, though Vincent did not know it yet. She was perhaps 22, with auburn hair pinned back from a face that showed both determination and exhaustion. Her calico dress had been mended more times than he could count from this distance, but she wore it with dignity as she removed her shoes and placed them gently on the feet of a girl who could not have been more than 8 years old. "These will be too big," Violet said softly, her voice carrying across the quiet afternoon street. "But you can stuff the toes with cloth until you grow into them. Better too big than nothing at all." The child's mother stood nearby, holding a baby and looking like she might weep from gratitude or shame or both. "Miss Nelson, we cannot." "You can and you will," Violet said firmly but kindly. "Winter will be here before we know it, and children need shoes more than I do." Vincent watched as Violet stood, now barefoot herself on the burning dirt road. She winced slightly as the heat met her stockinged feet, but smiled at the little girl. The child threw her arms around Violet's waist, and the mountain man felt something shift in his chest like a rockslide he could not stop. He had seen many things in his 30 years. He had fought grizzlies and survived avalanches. He had spent winters so cold his beard froze solid, and summers so hot the mountain streams ran dry. But he had never seen generosity like this, given without hesitation by someone who clearly had little to spare. Violet's feet moved quickly across the street toward the wooden sidewalk as the mother and children headed in the opposite direction. She was clearly trying not to show her discomfort, but Vincent could see the careful way she stepped. Without thinking about what he was doing or why, he deposited his supplies on the bench outside the general store and followed her. "Madam," he called out, his voice deeper than thunder rolling across the plains. Violet turned, and for the first time, Vincent saw her face fully. She had eyes like amber honey and a spray of freckles across her nose. Something in her expression suggested she had known hardship, but had not let it harden her heart. She looked up at him with curiosity but no fear, even though he towered over her and probably looked half wild with his frontier clothing and weathered features. "Yes?" she asked. Up close, Vincent found himself momentarily unable to speak. He was not a man accustomed to feeling uncertain, but this woman with her generous heart and steady gaze made him feel like a boy again. He cleared his throat. "I saw what you did," he said, "giving your shoes to that child." Violet's expression became guarded. "It was nothing. The girl needed them more than I do." "It was not nothing," Vincent said. He gestured toward her feet. "And now you have got none at all." "I will manage," Violet said, lifting her chin. "I have managed with less." There was pride in her voice, and Vincent recognized it because he carried the same pride himself. It was the pride of people who had learned to depend on themselves because they had no other choice. But pride did not keep feet protected from sharp stones and burning earth. "Come with me," Vincent said. It came out sounding more like a command than a request, and he saw Violet's eyes narrow. "I do not know you, sir." "Name is Vincent Whitmore," he said, pulling off his wide-brimmed hat in a gesture of respect his mother had taught him decades ago. "I have just come down from the mountains for supplies. I saw what you did, and I aim to buy you new shoes to replace the ones you gave away." Violet stared at him. "That is very kind, but I cannot accept." "You can and you will," Vincent said, using her own words from earlier. A hint of a smile touched his weathered face. "Children need shoes, but so do grown women, especially when they are foolish enough to give theirs away in the middle of August." "I am not foolish," Violet said, but there was no real anger in her voice. "No," Vincent agreed. "You are kind. Too kind for your own good, maybe, but that does not mean you should walk around barefoot." Violet looked at him for a long moment, and Vincent felt that gaze like a physical touch. He wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Probably a rough man who smelled of wood smoke and leather, whose hands were scarred from hard living, and whose face showed every year he had spent fighting the wilderness. He was not the kind of man refined ladies looked at twice, but Violet Nelson did not strike him as a refined lady. She struck him as someone real. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Violet asked finally. Vincent considered the question. He could tell her it was simple decency or that he had money to spare from selling his pelts. Both would be true. But there was something else, something he did not fully understand himself. A pull toward this woman that felt as inevitable as rivers flowing downhill. "Because someone should," he said. "And I am here and I can." Violet's expression softened. "Very well, Mr. Whitmore. I accept your generous offer. Thank you." They walked together to the cobbler's shop 3 buildings down. Violet moved carefully on the wooden sidewalk, and Vincent found himself wanting to simply pick her up and carry her there to spare her feet. But he suspected that would not be welcome, so he kept his pace slow to match hers. The cobbler was an older German man named Hermann who raised his eyebrows when they entered together, but asked no questions. Vincent stood back while Violet examined the limited selection of women's shoes. Her fingers traced over the leather with something like longing. "These would do," she said finally, pointing to a simple but sturdy pair of brown leather boots. "Try them on," Vincent said. "Make sure they fit proper." Violet sat and slipped her feet into the boots. They laced up past her ankles and looked like they would last through several Kansas winters. She stood and took a few experimental steps. "They fit well," she said, and Vincent did not miss the pleasure in her voice. "She will take them," Vincent told Herman, pulling out his coin purse. "Wait," Violet said. "Perhaps something less expensive. Those are the ones you want," Vincent said. "I can see it in your face, and good boots are worth paying for. They will last." He counted out the money, ignoring Violet's protests. Herman wrapped her old stockings and took the coins with a knowing smile that made Vincent want to scowl at him. But he kept his expression neutral as they left the shop. Outside, Violet turned to face him. They stood in the shade of the shop's awning, and the afternoon sun turned her hair to copper fire. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore," she said. "This is the kindest thing a stranger has ever done for me." "Vincent," he said. "Just Vincent." "Vincent," she repeated, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. "I am Violet Nelson. Pleased to know you proper, Miss Nelson." "Violet," she said, echoing his informality with a small smile. They stood there in the afternoon heat, and Vincent felt time slow down the way it did when he was hunting and had his prey in sight. Except Violet was not prey, and what he felt was not the thrill of the hunt. It was something entirely different, something that made his heart beat hard against his ribs. "Can I buy you supper?" The words came out before Vincent had fully thought them through. "As a way of, I do not know, celebrating your new boots." Violet laughed, and the sound was like water over stones. "That is a terrible excuse, Vincent Whitmore." "I know it," he admitted. "But I am not much good with words. What I mean is, I would like to spend more time with you, if you are willing." Violet studied him again with those amber eyes. "You are very direct." Mountain living does not leave much room for dancing around things, Vincent said. I say what I mean. I appreciate that, Violet said. Yes, I will have supper with you, though I should warn you that people will talk. Great Bend is a small town. Let them talk, Vincent said. I have never cared much what people say. They walked together to the only restaurant in town, a modest establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson who served good food and asked no questions. Vincent was aware of the looks they received as they entered together. He knew how they must appear, the wild mountain man and the respectable young woman who taught at the small schoolhouse on the edge of town. He learned this latter fact as they ate beef stew and fresh bread. Violet told him about her work teaching children aged 6 to 14, about how she had come to Great Bend 3 years ago from Illinois after her parents died of fever. She had an aunt here who had since passed away, leaving Violet alone but with a small house and the teaching position. It does not pay much, Violet said, but it is enough. And I love the children. They deserve better than this rough town can give them, but I do my best. Vincent told her about his life in the mountains, about trapping and hunting and the long, silent winters when he might go months without seeing another human soul. He did not tell her about the loneliness, but she seemed to hear it anyway. That sounds like a hard life, Violet said. It is the only life I have known since I was 18, Vincent said. My father was a mountain man before me. I learned the trade at his side until he died in a fall 10 years back. My mother passed when I was just a boy. No brothers or sisters, just me and the mountains. You must be very strong, Violet said. Not just in body, though clearly you are that too. Her cheeks colored slightly at this acknowledgement of his physical form, but in spirit, to live alone like that. I always thought I preferred it, Vincent said honestly. Company means complications. Mountains are simple. You respect them, they let you live. You disrespect them, they kill you, clean and clear. And people are not clean and clear, Violet asked with a slight smile. People are messy, Vincent said. They have feelings and expectations and needs. Mountains just are what they are. Yet here you are, buying shoes for strangers and asking them to supper, Violet pointed out. That seems rather people-oriented for a man who prefers solitude. Vincent met her eyes across the table. You are different. You do not know me. No, Vincent agreed. But I know what I saw today. I know generosity when I see it, and I know that something in me recognized something in you. Violet's breath caught slightly. That is quite a thing to say to someone you have just met. I told you I am not good with words, Vincent said. But I do not know how else to explain it. I saw you give away your shoes and something just clicked into place inside me, like I had been walking around with pieces missing and did not know it until that moment. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words hanging between them. Around them, the restaurant continued its evening business, but Vincent only had eyes for the woman across from him. I felt it too, Violet said finally, so quietly he almost missed it. When you spoke to me on the street, something that made me trust you even though you were a stranger. Even though you look like you could break a man in half with your bare hands. I probably could, Vincent said honestly, but I would never hurt you. I need you to know that. I do know it, Violet said. That is the strange part, I do. They finished their meal talking more easily, sharing stories and learning each other. Vincent discovered that Violet loved reading and missed having access to more books, that she wanted to travel someday but felt tied to her responsibilities in Great Bend, that she sang when she was alone and had once dreamed of singing in a real theater. Violet learned that Vincent could track anything across any terrain, that he had once nursed an injured wolf back to health over a long winter, that he carved small animals from wood when he could not sleep, that he had never expected to feel for anyone what he was beginning to feel for her. When the meal ended, and Vincent walked Violet back to her small house at the edge of town. The sun was setting and painting the Kansas sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. "This is me," Violet said, stopping in front of a modest but well-kept house with a small garden in front. Vincent looked at the house and tried to imagine Violet inside it, reading by lamplight or preparing lessons for her students. The image felt both intimate and right. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "You are staying in Great Bend." Violet sounded surprised. "I had planned to head back to the mountains in a few days," Vincent admitted, "but plans can change." "You should not change your plans for me," Violet said. "We have only just met." "I know," Vincent said, "but I also know I am not ready to say goodbye to you yet, not by a long stretch." Violet looked up at him in the fading light. "What are we doing, Vincent? What is this?" "I do not know," he said honestly, "but I want to find out, if you do too." She was quiet for a long moment, and Vincent's heart thundered in his chest as he waited for her answer. Finally, she nodded. "Yes," she said. "I want to find out too. Come to supper tomorrow night. I will cook and we can talk more." "I would like that," Vincent said. He wanted to touch her, to take her hand or brush the loose strand of hair from her face. But it was too soon, and he was still half covered in trail dust. So he simply tipped his hat to her and watched as she went inside, carrying with her the boots he had bought, and a piece of his heart he had not known he was ready to give. Vincent walked back through town to the boarding house where he had taken a room. Other men sat on the porch, smoking and talking, but he ignored them and went straight to his room. He lay on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about amber eyes and generous hearts, and the way his whole life seemed to have shifted direction in the space of a few hours. The next day passed slowly. Vincent cleaned himself up properly, getting a bath and a shave at the barber shop. He kept his hair long but had it trimmed neatly. He bought new clothes that were less frontier and more town-appropriate, though he could not bring himself to wear anything too fancy. When he looked at himself in the small mirror in his room, he almost did not recognize the man staring back. He looked civilized, almost respectable. He showed up at Violet's house at the appointed time carrying flowers he had picked from the prairie outside town. She answered the door wearing a simple blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and smiled at him with such warmth that he felt it like sunshine. "You look different," she said. "Handsome." "I cleaned up," Vincent said, suddenly feeling foolish with the flowers in his large hands. "These are for you." Violet took them with obvious delight. "They are beautiful. Come in." Her house was small but cozy, filled with books and simple furniture and touches that spoke of care. She had set the table for two, and wonderful smells came from her small kitchen. Vincent felt too large for the space, like he might accidentally break something just by turning around too quickly. "Sit," Violet said, gesturing to the table. "Everything is almost ready." She served roasted chicken and vegetables, fresh bread and butter, and a berry pie she had made that morning. It was simple food but cooked with skill, and Vincent ate gratefully while they talked. The conversation flowed easier than it had the night before, as if they were old friends rather than new acquaintances. "Tell me about the mountains," Violet said. "What is it like up there?" Vincent described the peaks that touched the sky, the meadows full of wildflowers in summer, the clear cold streams and the deep snow of winter. He told her about watching eagles soar and hearing wolves howl at the moon, about sunrises that painted the world gold and sunsets that set the peaks on fire. "It sounds beautiful," Violet said wistfully. "I have never seen mountains." "You should," Vincent said. "Everyone should see them at least once." "Perhaps someday," Violet said, "though I cannot imagine when. My students need me and I cannot just leave." "What about in summer when school is not in session?" Vincent asked. I use that time to prepare lessons for the next year, Violet said. And I take in mending work for extra money. Teachers are not paid well, Vincent, especially women teachers. He heard the frustration in her voice and understood it. The world was not fair, especially not to women trying to make their own way. It made him angry on her behalf, this kind, generous woman who gave away her shoes and worked herself to the bone for children who were not her own. You deserve better, he said. Violet laughed softly. Perhaps, but we do not always get what we deserve. They moved to her small sitting room after the meal, and Violet played the piano that sat against one wall. Her fingers moved over the keys with practiced ease, and she sang in a voice that was clear and true. Vincent sat and listened, mesmerized. He had heard few songs in his years in the mountains, just his own rough voice singing old ballads his mother had taught him. But Violet's singing was something else entirely, something that reached inside his chest and made him ache. When she finished, he found he could not speak for a moment. That was beautiful, he said finally. You have a real gift. Thank you, Violet said. Music is one of the few luxuries I allow myself. The piano belonged to my aunt. I probably should sell it, but I cannot bring myself to do it. Do not sell it, Vincent said firmly. Some things are worth more than money. They talked late into the night, and when Vincent finally forced himself to leave, he knew with absolute certainty that he was falling in love with Violet Nelson. It was too fast, too sudden, but it was also as real as anything he had ever felt. More real than the mountains he called home, or the solitary life he had always assumed would be his fate. The next days fell into a pattern. Vincent spent his mornings taking care of business in town, selling his pelts and buying supplies. His afternoons and evenings belonged to Violet. They walked together along the Arkansas River that ran near Great Bend, sat in her garden while she tended her vegetables, visited the schoolhouse where she showed him the work her students had done. He met her students when they returned after a Sunday off. The children looked at him with wide eyes, this giant man with his muscled frame and long hair. But Violet introduced him as her friend, and the children accepted him as children do. He found himself helping fix a broken desk and showing the older boys how to whittle. You are good with them, Violet said after the children had gone home for the day. Children are honest, Vincent said. They say what they mean. I like that. They like you too, Violet said. Especially after you told them about the grizzly bear. Vincent had indeed told them about his encounter with a massive grizzly 2 winters back, though he had edited the story to make it less terrifying. The children had been enthralled anyway, hanging on every word. I may have exaggerated some parts, Vincent admitted. I know, Violet said with a smile, but they loved it anyway. A week passed, then another. Vincent kept telling himself he would leave tomorrow, head back to his mountains and his solitary life. But tomorrow kept not coming. He could not seem to make himself go, not when being near Violet felt like breathing. They had not so much as held hands, though Vincent wanted to touch her constantly. He held back out of respect, knowing that Violet had a reputation to protect in this small town. But the tension between them grew with each passing day, a pull that was almost physical in its intensity. It was Violet who finally broke the barrier. They were sitting in her garden one evening as the sun set, and she simply reached over and took his hand. Her fingers were small in his large calloused palm, but they fit perfectly. I have been thinking, she said, not looking at him. About what? Vincent asked, though his heart already knew. About us. About what this is becoming. And what is it becoming? He asked softly. Something important, Violet said. Something that frightens me because it feels too big and too fast. I know, Vincent said. I feel it too. I never expected this, Violet continued. I thought I would live out my days here teaching, maybe eventually marry some local farmer or shopkeeper because it was practical. I never thought I would meet someone who made me feel the way you do." "How do I make you feel?" Vincent asked, needing to hear it. Violet finally looked at him, and her amber eyes were bright with emotion. "Like I am fully alive for the first time, like I have been asleep and just woke up, like everything before you was just preparing me for now." Vincent's chest tightened. He squeezed her hand gently. "That is exactly how you make me feel, like the mountains were just somewhere I was hiding until I was ready to find you." "What do we do about it?" Violet whispered. "I do not know," Vincent said honestly. "I live in the mountains. You live here. Those are not small things." "No, they are not," Violet agreed. They sat in silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Vincent thought about his life in the mountains, the freedom and solitude he had always treasured. Then he thought about a life without Violet in it, and the solitude suddenly seemed less like freedom and more like a prison. "I could stay," he said finally. "Here in Great Bend, find work, build a life." "Could you be happy here?" Violet asked. "Away from the mountains?" Vincent considered this carefully. "I think I could be happy anywhere as long as I was with you." "But you would miss them," Violet said. "The mountains. I can see it in your face when you talk about them. They are part of who you are." "You are right," Vincent admitted. "I would miss them. But I would miss you more if I left." "We have only known each other 2 weeks," Violet pointed out. "I know. Does that change how you feel?" "No," Violet said. "It does not change anything. I love you, Vincent Whitmore." "I know I should not say it so soon, but it is true, and I am tired of pretending it is not." Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. She fit against his chest like she was made to be there. "I love you too, Violet Nelson. I think I loved you from the moment I saw you give those shoes away." They held each other as the stars came out above Great Bend, Kansas, and Vincent thought that he had traveled thousands of miles through wilderness and over mountains, but this moment right here made every hard mile worth it. "Come with me," he said suddenly. Violet pulled back to look at him. "What? Come with me to the mountains," Vincent said, the idea taking shape even as he spoke. "Not forever if you do not want, but come for a season, see them, see the life I have lived. Then you will know what you would be asking me to give up if I stayed here, and I will show you that I would give it up gladly for you." "I cannot just leave," Violet said. "The children's school ends in 3 weeks for summer," Vincent said. "You told me that yourself. Come with me then. Spend the summer in the mountains. If you hate it, we will come back before school starts again, and I will stay here with you, but if you love it—" He trailed off, not sure what he was offering. "If I love it," Violet prompted. "Then maybe we could find a way to have both," Vincent said. "Summers in the mountains, winters here for your teaching. I do not know if it would work, but we could try." Violet was quiet for a long moment. "That is a mad plan." "Probably," Vincent agreed. "People will talk. A single woman going off into the mountains with a man." "Let them talk," Vincent said. "Or—" He took a deep breath, knowing he was about to take the biggest risk of his life. "Or we could get married first, then they would have nothing to say." Violet stared at him. "Did you just propose to me?" "I think I did," Vincent said, "though I did it badly. Let me try again." He stood and pulled her to her feet, then dropped to one knee in her small garden. He had no ring, nothing to offer her but himself and his heart and a life that would be complicated and unconventional. But he offered it anyway. "Violet Nelson," he said, looking up at her face silhouetted against the starlight. "I know we have only known each other a short time. I know I am not the kind of man you probably imagined marrying. I am rough and I have lived alone too long, and I do not always know the right words to say. But I love you with everything I am. I love your generous heart and your beautiful voice and the way you care for those children like they are your own. I love how you made me feel like I finally came home after 30 years of wandering. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Violet's face, catching the lamplight from her windows. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Whitmore." He stood and kissed her then, finally, for the first time. Her lips were soft and she tasted like the berry pie they had eaten after supper. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper as weeks of restrained longing broke free. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you," Violet said again. "I love you too," Vincent replied. "More than I knew it was possible to love someone." They spent the rest of the evening making plans. They would marry as soon as possible, before the gossip could start. Then Violet would finish out the school year while Vincent prepared for their journey to the mountains. It would be her first time seeing his world, their first real test as a couple. But standing there with her hand in his, Vincent had never been more certain of anything. The next morning, Vincent went to see the circuit preacher who passed through Great Bend once a month. He was scheduled to arrive in 3 days, and Vincent arranged for him to perform the marriage ceremony. Then he went to the general store and bought Violet a simple gold band, the best ring the store had to offer. Violet told her students that she was getting married, and the children were thrilled. The girls especially peppered her with questions about the wedding and her new husband. The little girl who had received Violet's shoes told everyone that Mr. Whitmore was a hero who had fought bears and wolves and saved her teacher's life, a story that had grown considerably in the telling. Word spread through Great Bend quickly. Some people were scandalized that the school teacher was marrying a mountain man she had known less than a month. Others were romantic about it, touched by the story of how they had met. A few of the local men who had hoped to court Violet themselves were disappointed, but most people seemed genuinely happy for her. Mrs. Patterson from the restaurant insisted on making their wedding cake. Herman the cobbler told anyone who would listen that he had known they would end up together from the moment they walked into his shop. The boarding house owner where Vincent was staying clapped him on the back and told him he was a lucky man. The wedding took place on a Sunday morning in the small church at the center of town. Violet wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, and Vincent wore the new suit he had purchased for the occasion. He felt stiff and uncomfortable in it, but the look in Violet's eyes when she saw him made it worthwhile. The ceremony was brief and simple. Vincent's hands shook slightly as he slipped the ring onto Violet's finger, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they were doing. But when she looked up at him and smiled, every doubt vanished. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Vincent cupped Violet's face in his large hands and kissed her sweetly, aware of the townspeople watching but caring only about the woman in his arms. When they pulled apart, Violet was crying happy tears, and Vincent felt his own eyes sting. They were married. This generous, beautiful woman was his wife. The thought filled him with wonder and a fierce protective instinct that was almost overwhelming. The townspeople threw rice as they walked out of the church together. Mrs. Patterson had prepared a small reception in the restaurant, and most of Great Bend showed up to celebrate with them. Vincent felt out of place among so many people, but Violet's hand in his anchored him. They spent their wedding night in Violet's small house, which was now their house. Vincent was gentle with her, taking his time despite the desire that coursed through him. She was nervous but trusting, and when they finally came together as husband and wife, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, and Vincent stroked her hair while she traced the scars on his chest. "Tell me about this one," she said, touching a long white line across his ribs. "Grizzly," Vincent said. "Different one from the story I told the children. I was younger and stupider and got between a mother and her cubs. And this, she touched another scar on his shoulder. Arrow, Vincent said. Argument with some trappers over territory. We all survived, but it was close. You have lived such a dangerous life, Violet said softly. I have lived the only life I knew, Vincent replied. But now I have you to live for. I will be more careful. Good, Violet said. She kissed the scar on his shoulder. Because I plan to keep you around for a very long time, husband. I like the sound of that, Vincent said. Husband, wife. I never thought those words would apply to me. Nor I, Violet admitted. I thought I would be alone. But then you walked into my life and changed everything. They made love again, slower and sweeter this time, learning each other's bodies and preferences. Vincent had been with women before, but never like this, never with love and commitment and the promise of forever. It changed everything, made every touch mean something deeper. The next weeks were busy ones. Violet finished the school year, saying goodbye to her students with promises to return in the fall. Vincent prepared for their journey to the mountains, buying supplies and horses for the trip. He taught Violet to ride properly, as she had only basic experience with horses. I feel like I am going to fall off, Violet said, gripping the horse's mane with white knuckles. You will not fall, Vincent assured her. I will not let you. Trust yourself and trust the horse. Gradually, Violet grew more comfortable in the saddle. Vincent found he enjoyed teaching her, seeing her gain confidence and skill. She was a quick learner, applying herself to riding the way she probably applied herself to everything. They packed carefully for the journey. Violet brought books and her small writing desk, determined to continue preparing lessons even in the wilderness. Vincent brought his traps and hunting gear, along with supplies to last them through the summer and into fall if they decided to stay that long. Saying goodbye to Great Bend was harder than Violet had expected. The children cried, and several of the mothers hugged her and told her to be safe. Mrs. Patterson pressed food into their hands for the journey. Even some of the men who had initially been suspicious of Vincent shook his hand and wished them well. You will come back, the little girl who had received Violet's shoes asked tearfully. I will come back, Violet promised. Before school starts in the fall, I promise. They left Great Bend on a bright morning in late June, riding west toward the mountains that were still days away. Vincent led and Violet followed, both of them on horseback with a pack mule carrying their supplies. The prairie stretched endless around them, golden grass rippling in the wind. Violet was quiet for the first few hours, looking back occasionally at the town that had been her home for 3 years. Vincent understood what she was feeling, the strange mix of excitement and fear that came with leaving the familiar behind. He let her process it in silence, knowing she would talk when she was ready. That night they camped under the stars, Vincent showing Violet how to set up their tent and start a fire properly. She watched everything he did with intense focus, clearly determined to learn. In the mountains, you need to know how to do these things yourself, Vincent explained. If something happened to me, you would need to be able to survive on your own until you could get help. Nothing is going to happen to you, Violet said firmly. Probably not, Vincent agreed. But knowing how to take care of yourself brings peace of mind. They ate beans and salt pork cooked over the fire, and Violet declared it the best meal she had ever eaten. Vincent laughed and told her that everything tasted better outdoors. Later, wrapped in blankets under the vast expanse of stars, Violet pressed close to his side. I have never seen so many stars, she said in wonder. In town, there are lanterns and buildings in the way, but out here. Wait until we get to the mountains, Vincent said. The sky is even bigger there, and the stars so bright you can read by them. I can hardly imagine, Violet said. Is it very different from Kansas? Completely different, Vincent said. Higher and colder and wilder, but beautiful in a way that makes your heart hurt. They traveled for 8 days, crossing prairie and entering the foothills. Vincent watched Violet carefully, looking for signs that she was tiring or having second thoughts. But she seemed to grow stronger with each day, more confident and at ease. She learned to help with the horses and to cook over the open fire. She spotted wildlife before Vincent did sometimes, her eyes growing sharp from constant watching. "There," she said one afternoon, pointing. "Is that an elk?" Vincent looked and saw a massive bull elk standing on a ridge, silhouetted against the sky. "It is, good eye." "It is magnificent," Violet breathed. They saw their first real mountain 2 days later, a peak rising sharp and snow-capped against the blue sky. Violet actually gasped, and Vincent felt a surge of pride as if he had personally created the mountain just to impress her. "It is beautiful," Violet said. "You were right. My heart actually hurts looking at it." "Wait until you see them all around you," Vincent said. "Wait until you hear a mountain storm or watch the sunrise from a high meadow. This is just the beginning." They climbed higher, following paths that only someone with Vincent's experience could find. The air grew thinner and cooler. Violet tired more easily at the higher elevation, and they took frequent breaks. Vincent did not mind. He was in no hurry, content to watch his wife experience his world for the first time. "How much farther to your cabin?" Violet asked on their 11th day of travel. "2 more days," Vincent said. "Maybe less if we make good time tomorrow." "I cannot wait to see it," Violet said. "Your home." "Our home," Vincent corrected. "If you want it to be." They reached the cabin on a bright afternoon with the sun warm on their faces. It was not much to look at. A rough log structure built by Vincent's father decades ago and maintained by Vincent ever since. But it was solid and weatherproof, with a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over a valley that took Violet's breath away. "Oh, Vincent," she said, standing in the doorway and looking out. "It is perfect." The cabin had one main room that served as kitchen and living area with a separate bedroom and a small loft above. Vincent had built most of the furniture himself, rough but functional. Everything was covered in dust from months of disuse, but Violet did not seem to care. She walked through the space touching things, examining his few possessions. "We will need to clean," she said finally, "but I can make this comfortable, homey." They spent the next days doing just that. Violet scrubbed every surface while Vincent repaired damage from the winter and restocked their firewood. She hung curtains she had brought from Great Bend and arranged her books on the rough shelves Vincent had built. Slowly, the cabin transformed from a bachelor's rough shelter into a real home. Vincent taught Violet about living in the mountains, how to fish in the cold streams and preserve the catch, how to recognize animal tracks and know which creatures were dangerous and which were harmless, how to find edible plants and berries, how to shoot the rifle he gave her, making her practice until she could hit a target consistently. "I do not like killing things," Violet said after she successfully shot her first rabbit. "I know," Vincent said, "but up here, being able to hunt might save your life someday." "You do not have to like it, but you need to know how." Violet proved to be a quick learner, and Vincent found himself constantly impressed by her adaptability. The refined schoolteacher from Great Bend transformed before his eyes into someone who could skin a rabbit and check trap lines without flinching. But she never lost her essential gentleness, never became hardened by the harsh realities of mountain life. The summer days fell into a rhythm. Vincent would hunt or check his trap lines while Violet tended the small garden she had planted near the cabin. They fished together in the evenings, sitting by the stream and talking about everything and nothing. At night, They made love in their bed with the window open to let in the cool mountain air and the sound of the forest. Violet sang while she worked, her voice echoing through the valley. Vincent would sometimes stop whatever he was doing just to listen, marveling that this woman with her beautiful voice and generous heart had chosen him. Bears and wolves might be in the forest, but the most dangerous thing in his life now was how much he loved her, how vulnerable that love made him. "What are you thinking about?" Violet asked one evening as they sat outside the cabin watching the sunset paint the peaks gold and pink. "How happy I am," Vincent said honestly. "How I never knew I could feel like this." "I feel the same," Violet said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I thought I would miss Great Bend, miss my students and my piano and civilization, and I do miss them sometimes. But not as much as I thought I would, not nearly as much." "Do you think you could be happy here?" Vincent asked. "Not just for a summer, but really, as a life?" Violet was quiet for a long moment. "I think I could," she said finally. "But I would need something of my own, Vincent. I love being your wife and learning this life, but I am also a teacher. That is part of who I am." "I know," Vincent said. "I would never ask you to give that up." "What if we did what you suggested before?" Violet said. "Spend summers here in the mountains, then go back to Great Bend for the school year. I could teach from September through May, then we would come back here for June, July, and August." Vincent considered this. It would mean months apart if he stayed in the mountains while she taught, or months away from the wilderness if he stayed in town with her. Neither option was perfect, but the alternative was asking Violet to give up teaching entirely, and he could not do that to her. "We could both go to Great Bend for the school year," he said slowly. "I could find work there, building maybe, or helping at the livery. Then come summer we come back here together." "You would do that?" Violet asked. "Give up half the year in the mountains?" "For you, yes," Vincent said. "I would give up all of it if I had to. But this way we both get what we need. You get your teaching, I get my mountains, and we get each other all year round." "It would be hard," Violet said, "going back and forth, never fully settling in one place." "Maybe," Vincent agreed. "Or maybe it would be perfect. Best of both worlds." They discussed it more over the following weeks, refining the plan. Vincent would sell his furs in the spring before they went to Great Bend, giving them money to live on during the school year. His carpentry skills could supplement Violet's teaching salary. They would save as much as they could to make the summers in the mountains comfortable. "We could build a bigger cabin," Vincent said one night. "One with a real bedroom and a space for you to work on your lessons. Maybe even room for children someday if we are blessed with them." "Children," Violet said softly, her hand moving to her stomach in an unconscious gesture that made Vincent's heart skip. "You want children?" he asked. "Yes," Violet said. "Someday, do you?" "I never thought I did," Vincent admitted. "But now, thinking about a child with your eyes and your kindness, yes, I want that very much." August came, and with it the knowledge that they would soon have to leave the mountains for Great Bend. Violet had grown tanned and strong from the summer's work, and Vincent had never seen her more beautiful. She moved through the wilderness with increasing confidence, no longer the city woman who had arrived months ago. They were checking Vincent's trap lines one afternoon when they heard sounds that made Vincent freeze. Voices, multiple people, and they were coming closer. He put a hand on Violet's arm, signaling her to be quiet. Through the trees came a group of men, rough-looking trappers by their gear and clothing. Vincent recognized two of them, men he had had disputes with in the past over territory. His hand moved to his rifle. "Well, well," said a man named Carson, a mean-spirited trapper with a scar across his cheek. "Look who it is, Whitmore. Heard you were married now, this your wife she is," Vincent said shortly, stepping slightly in front of Violet. "What are you doing on my land, Carson? Your land?" Carson laughed. Last I checked, the mountains belonged to whoever was strong enough to claim them. I am claiming them, Vincent said flatly. Find your own territory. Maybe we like this territory, said another man, a large brute named Dutch. Maybe we think there is room to share. There is not, Vincent said. His voice was calm, but Violet could feel the tension in him, the readiness for violence. Carson's eyes slid to Violet, looking her up and down in a way that made Vincent's jaw clench. Pretty wife you have got there, Whitmore. Must get lonely up here with just the two of you. Walk away, Carson, Vincent said quietly. Right now, while you still can. Something in his voice must have communicated the seriousness of the threat because Carson raised his hands in mock surrender. Easy there. We are just passing through. No need for trouble. Then pass through somewhere else, Vincent said, and do not come back. The men grumbled but moved on, giving Vincent and Violet a wide berth. Vincent watched them go, not relaxing until they were out of sight. Only then did he turn to Violet. Are you all right? He asked. I am fine, Violet said, though her voice shook slightly. Who were they? Trouble, Vincent said grimly. Men like that are part of why I usually keep to myself. Not everyone up here respects boundaries or other people's claims. Will they come back? Violet asked. Maybe, Vincent said honestly. Probably not if they have any sense, but we should head back to the cabin and stay alert for a while. They returned to the cabin quickly, and Vincent spent the rest of the day checking the perimeter and making sure their weapons were loaded and ready. Violet watched him work, seeing a side of him she had not fully witnessed before. This was the mountain man who survived alone for years, the man who had fought grizzlies and lived through harsh winters. He was no longer just her gentle husband, but also a protector, dangerous when he needed to be. That night, Vincent kept his rifle close as they slept. But the trappers did not return, and after a few days, the tension began to ease. Still, the encounter had reminded them both that the mountains were not just beautiful but also dangerous, especially for a woman alone. I do not like thinking about you up here by yourself after I leave, Violet said one evening. I will not be alone, Vincent reminded her. You will be with me. We will go to Great Bend together, remember. But in summers when we are here, what if something happens to you? Violet pressed. What if you are hurt or killed and I am alone up here with men like those trappers around? That will not happen, Vincent said firmly. I am careful, and I know these mountains better than anyone. I will keep us both safe. But he understood her fear because he felt it too. Loving someone meant having something to lose, and the mountain that had seemed like his fortress now felt more dangerous because Violet was in it. September approached, and they began preparing for the journey back to Great Bend. Vincent packed the furs he had accumulated over the previous winter, planning to sell them in town. Violet packed her books and the lessons she had prepared over the summer. They both looked around the cabin with a sense of loss, knowing it would be months before they saw it again. We will come back, Vincent assured her. As soon as school is done in the spring, we will come straight back here. I know, Violet said, but it still feels hard to leave. The journey back to Great Bend took them 9 days, slightly faster than the journey out had been. Violet was a much more experienced rider now and could handle longer days in the saddle. They talked about their plans for the school year, how they would manage with Vincent living in town after years in the wilderness. It will be strange for you, Violet said. Living with so many people around all the time. I will adjust, Vincent said. As long as I am with you, I can adjust to anything. Great Bend welcomed them back with curiosity and some surprise. Many people had assumed Violet would not return, that the mountains had claimed her permanently. But here she was, tanned and healthy, her mountain man husband at her side. They moved into Violet's small house together, which felt cramped after the spaciousness of the mountains, but was still home. Vincent found work at the lumber mill and doing carpentry around town. His strength and skill made him valuable, and he quickly earned respect despite his rough exterior. Violet returned to her teaching with renewed energy. Her students were thrilled to have her back and peppered her with questions about her summer in the mountains. She told them carefully edited stories that made their eyes go wide with wonder. Life in Great Bend settled into a new pattern. Vincent worked during the day while Violet taught. In the evenings, they would come together and share their days, finding comfort in each other after hours apart. Vincent struggled sometimes with the confinement of town life, the noise and the closeness of other people. But Violet's presence made it bearable, and the knowledge that summer would come again kept him going. Winter arrived, harsh and cold. Vincent helped prepare their house against the weather, making sure they had enough wood for the fireplace and food stored up. He thought about the cabin in the mountains, buried in snow, and wondered how it was faring. But mostly he thought about the woman beside him, warm in their bed while the wind howled outside. "Do you miss it?" Violet asked him one snowy night. "The mountains." "Yes," Vincent admitted, "but I miss you more when we are apart, even for a day, so I am where I need to be." Christmas came, and they celebrated it simply with some of Violet's students and their families. Vincent had carved small wooden animals for all the children, spending his evenings working on the delicate figures. The children were delighted, and Violet looked at him with such love that it made his chest ache. "You are wonderful with them," she said later. "The children adore you." "They are good kids," Vincent said. "Remind me why your teaching matters so much." As winter turned to spring, Violet began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first, she attributed it to something she had eaten, but when the sickness persisted for weeks, she began to suspect the truth. She went to see the town doctor, who confirmed her suspicions with a knowing smile. "You are with child, Mrs. Whitmore," he said. "I would say about 3 months along, so the baby should arrive in early autumn." Violet walked home in a daze, her hand on her still flat stomach. A baby. She and Vincent were going to have a baby. The thought filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. How would they manage a child with their divided life? What would this mean for their summers in the mountains? She told Vincent that evening, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he simply stared at her, processing the information. Then a slow smile spread across his weathered face, transforming him. "A baby," he said. "We are having a baby." "We are," Violet confirmed. "Are you happy?" Instead of answering, Vincent swept her into his arms, holding her close but carefully, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said into her hair. Terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. "A baby, Violet, our baby." They held each other in their small house while the spring rain fell outside, thinking about the new life growing between them and all the changes it would bring. The news spread through Great Bend quickly, as news always did in small towns. The women offered advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. The men clapped Vincent on the back and teased him about sleepless nights. Violet's students were excited to learn that their teacher was going to be a mother, but the pregnancy also meant changes to their plans. Violet would not be able to make the journey to the mountains in her condition, not safely. The rough riding and high altitude would be too dangerous for her and the baby. They would need to stay in Great Bend for the summer, and probably for several months after the baby was born. "I am sorry," Violet said when they discussed it. "I know you were looking forward to going back." "Do not be sorry," Vincent said firmly. "Our child is more important than any plan. We will go back to the mountains next summer, all 3 of us. This summer we stay here and prepare for the baby." Vincent threw himself into preparing for their child's arrival. He built a beautiful cradle from oak, spending hours sanding and polishing until it was smooth as silk. He expanded their small house, adding a room that would serve as the nursery. His carpentry skills were much in demand around town, and the money he earned went toward supplies for the baby. Violet continued teaching through the end of the school year, though she tired more easily as her pregnancy progressed. Her students were protective of her, the older ones helping with tasks that were becoming difficult. The little girl who had received Violet's shoes years ago, now 9 years old, appointed herself as Violet's special helper. Summer came, hot and dusty. Violet grew round with the baby, and Vincent found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body. He would place his large hand on her swollen belly and feel their child move beneath his palm, and the wonder of it never faded. "You think it is a boy or a girl?" Violet asked one evening. "I do not care," Vincent said honestly. "As long as you and the baby are healthy, I will be happy either way." "I think it is a boy," Violet said. "The way he kicks, he feels strong like you." August arrived and Violet's due date approached. The heat was oppressive, and she was uncomfortable and tired. Vincent did everything he could to make her comfortable, but there was only so much he could do. He hated seeing her in discomfort and felt helpless, a feeling he was not accustomed to. The labor started on a hot September morning. Violet woke Vincent with a gasp, her hand clutching her swollen belly. "It is time," she said. Vincent had faced down grizzlies and survived mountain winters that killed other men, but nothing had prepared him for the terror of watching his wife in labor. The town doctor came and took over, along with several experienced women from town. They banished Vincent from the room, leaving him to pace in the small parlor while Violet's cries echoed through the house. The labor lasted 12 hours, the longest 12 hours of Vincent's life. He wore a path in the wooden floor with his pacing, praying to a God he was not sure he believed in to please let Violet and the baby be all right. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby's cry, strong and healthy. The door to the bedroom opened and the doctor emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Whitmore," he said. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife came through it beautifully. They are both fine." Vincent felt his knees go weak with relief. "Can I see them, of course? Come meet your son." Vincent entered the bedroom to find Violet propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up as he approached, tears streaming down her face. "Vincent, meet our son," she said softly. Vincent approached carefully, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the blankets. The baby had Violet's nose and a surprising amount of dark hair. His eyes were closed, but his small mouth worked as if he was already looking for food. "He is perfect," Vincent said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are perfect, both of you." "Do you want to hold him?" Violet asked. Vincent was terrified of dropping or hurting the tiny creature, but he carefully took his son in his large arms. The baby was so small, so fragile, yet already Vincent could feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was his son, his child to protect and provide for and raise to be a good man. "What should we name him?" Violet asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Vincent looked down at his son and thought about what he wanted for this child. Strength and integrity, kindness and courage. A name that would serve him well in whatever life he chose. "What about Victor?" Vincent said. "Victor Whitmore." "Victor," Violet repeated, trying it out. "I like it. Strong and classic. Victor Whitmore." The baby chose that moment to open his eyes, revealing them to be a startling blue. He looked up at his father with the unfocused gaze of the very young, and Vincent felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "Hello, Victor," he said softly. I am your father, and I promise you I will always keep you and your mother safe. Always." The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting. Victor proved to have strong lungs and used them frequently, especially at night. Violet was recovering from the birth and trying to learn how to nurse, which was harder than either of them had expected. Vincent helped as much as he could, changing the baby and walking him when he fussed, but there was only so much he could do. But despite the exhaustion, there was also incredible joy. Watching Violet with their son, seeing her gentle patience as she cared for him, made Vincent fall in love with her all over again. And holding his son, feeling the trust with which the baby relaxed in his arms, gave him a sense of purpose he had never experienced before. The town of Great Bend embraced the new family. People brought food and baby clothes, offered advice and help. Violet's students came to visit, peering at the baby with wide eyes and asking when Miss Nelson would return to teaching. "Not this year," Violet told them gently. "But I will be back next autumn. I promise." She had decided to take the school year off to be with Victor, and the school board had agreed to hold her position. It meant they would have less money, but both she and Vincent agreed that their son's first year was too precious to miss. As autumn turned to winter, they settled into a rhythm with their new family. Victor grew rapidly, his small face filling out and his eyes focusing properly. He began to smile at them, and both Vincent and Violet would do ridiculous things to earn those smiles. Vincent, the tough mountain man who had lived alone for years, would make funny faces and sing silly songs just to hear his son laugh. "Who knew you were such a softy?" Violet teased one evening, watching Vincent cradle Victor and sing to him in his deep voice. "Only for you two," Vincent said. "The rest of the world can think what it likes." Spring came again, and with it plans to finally return to the mountains for the summer. Victor was nearly 8 months old, sturdy and healthy. The doctor approved the journey as long as they were careful and took their time. They made preparations, buying supplies and a better horse for Violet that could handle carrying both her and Victor. Vincent built a carrier that would allow Violet to hold the baby safely while riding. They planned a slower journey than before, with more breaks and shorter days in the saddle. Saying goodbye to Great Bend was easier this time, knowing they would be back in the fall. They set out on a beautiful May morning with Victor strapped safely to Violet's chest in the carrier Vincent had designed. The baby seemed to enjoy the motion of the horse, falling asleep to the gentle rhythm. The journey took nearly 2 weeks with the slower pace, but they finally arrived at the mountain cabin on an afternoon with wildflowers blooming in the meadows. Violet gasped as she saw it again, tears in her eyes. "I have missed this place so much," she said. The cabin had weathered the winter well, and they spent days cleaning and preparing it for summer living with a baby. Vincent baby-proofed the space, covering sharp corners and making sure there was nothing Victor could hurt himself on as he began to crawl and explore. Life in the mountains with a baby was different from their first summer alone, but no less wonderful. Victor thrived in the fresh mountain air, growing strong and curious. He would sit on a blanket in the meadow while Violet worked in the garden, watching butterflies and reaching for flowers. Vincent would take him fishing, the baby sitting in a sling on his father's broad chest while Vincent worked the line. "He is going to grow up loving this place as much as you do," Violet observed one evening. "I hope so," Vincent said. "But if he does not, that will be all right too. He should make his own choices about what kind of life he wants." They had another encounter with trappers that summer, but this time it was friendly. A family man named Thomas who had heard about Vincent and Violet came to trade and share news. He had a wife and 3 children of his own, and the two families spent a pleasant afternoon together, the children playing while the adults talked. "Good to see Whitmore finally has a family," Thomas said. "You always seemed too solitary to me, too closed off." "I was," Vincent admitted. "Until I met Violet. She changed everything." The summer passed too quickly. Victor took his first steps in the mountain meadow, stumbling between his parents with a delighted laugh. He said his first word, "Dada," while Vincent was carrying him on his shoulders to check the trap lines. He learned to clap his hands and wave goodbye, to recognize the animals Vincent carved for him and make their sounds. As September approached, they packed up again for the journey back to Great Bend. It was harder to leave this time, knowing how much Victor was thriving here. But Violet's teaching called, and they had responsibilities to the town that had supported them. The pattern continued for the next years. Winters in Great Bend, where Violet taught and Vincent worked various jobs. Summers in the mountains, where they lived simply, and their family grew in love and strength. Victor grew into a sturdy, curious boy who was as comfortable with books as he was with the wilderness. When Victor was 3, Violet became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. The baby came in early spring, another boy they named Vaughn. He was quieter than Victor had been, more observant with Violet's amber eyes. "2 boys," Vincent said, holding his newborn son while Victor climbed on the bed to see his brother. "We are outnumbered, Violet." "We will manage," Violet said with a tired smile. They did more than manage. They thrived. The boys grew up split between 2 worlds, learning to read and write in Great Bend's schoolhouse under their mother's tutelage, learning to hunt and fish and respect nature in the mountains under their father's guidance. They were happy, well-adjusted children who adapted easily to their unusual life. When Victor was 6 and Vaughn was 3, Violet discovered she was pregnant once more. This time, the baby was a girl, born during their summer in the mountains with only Vincent to assist. It was terrifying and primal and brought them closer than ever. "What should we name her?" Vincent asked, holding his tiny daughter with the same wonder he had felt holding his sons. "What about Vera?" Violet suggested. "It means truth, and she is the truth of our love." "Vera Whitmore," Vincent said. "Perfect." The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of their divided life. The children grew and thrived. Victor showed an aptitude for learning and told them he wanted to be a doctor someday. Vaughn was quieter but had his father's skill with his hands and loved to build things. Vera was fierce and independent, equally comfortable climbing trees and studying her letters. Vincent and Violet watched their children grow with pride and amazement. On summer evenings in the mountains, they would sit on the porch of the expanded cabin Vincent had built and watch the children play in the meadow, chasing each other and laughing. "You ever regret it?" Violet asked one such evening. "Giving up your solitary life in the mountains?" Vincent pulled her close, her head resting on his shoulder the way it had that first night in her garden in Great Bend so many years ago. "Not for a single moment," he said. "You and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. I would give up the mountains entirely if I had to, though I am grateful I do not have to choose." "I am grateful too," Violet said, "for all of it, for you seeing me give those shoes away, for you being brave enough to approach me, for you asking me to marry you after knowing me just weeks." "Best decision I ever made," Vincent said. As the sun set behind the mountain peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, their 3 children ran up to the porch, all talking at once about the frog they had found in the stream and could they please keep it. Vincent looked at his family, his wife and his children and the life they had built together between the mountains and the plains, and thought about that day in Great Bend when he had seen a woman give her shoes to a barefoot child. He had bought her new shoes and asked for her hand, and she had given him everything. A home, a family, a reason to live for something beyond mere survival. "All right," he said to the children. "You can keep the frog, but you are responsible for taking care of it." The children cheered and ran off to set up a proper home for their new pet. Violet laughed and shook her head. "You are too soft with them," she said without any real criticism. "I learned from the best," Vincent replied, kissing her temple. They sat together as the stars began to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. The mountains stood eternal around them, and down on the plains, Great Bend waited for their return in the fall. Between the two, they had built a life that honored both worlds, that gave their children the best of the wilderness and civilization. Years later, when Vincent was 55 and Violet was 47, they made a decision. Victor was finishing his medical training in Denver, Vaughn was running a successful carpentry business in Great Bend, and Vera was teaching at her mother's old school. The children were grown and launched, living their own lives. "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked Violet. Now that it is just us again, Violet thought about it carefully. She had been teaching for over 25 years, had raised 3 wonderful children, had lived a full and meaningful life. But there was still more she wanted to do. "I want to spend more time in the mountains," she said finally. "Maybe just summers still, or maybe longer. I want to have time with you without the constant rushing back and forth. The children are grown. My students have a good teacher in Vera. I think it is time for us." Vincent felt something loosen in his chest that he had not realized was tight. "I want that too," he said. "More than anything." They shifted their pattern once more. Instead of splitting every year evenly, they spent most of their time in the mountains, coming down to Great Bend for holidays and important family events. They became the slightly mysterious couple who lived up in the high country, emerging occasionally to visit their children and grandchildren, before disappearing back into the wilderness. Their grandchildren thought they were fascinating and begged to visit the mountain cabin. Vincent and Violet would host them for weeks at a time during summers, teaching them the same skills they had taught their own children. The grandchildren would return to their parents with stories of their adventures, of grandfather Vincent who could track anything and grandmother Violet who knew every plant and bird by name. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Violet to the exact spot where he had first seen her give her shoes to that barefoot child. Great Bend had grown over the years, but this street corner remained much the same. "You remember?" he asked. "Of course I remember," Violet said. "It was the day my whole life changed." "Mine too," Vincent said. He pulled out a small box from his pocket. Inside was a new pair of boots, finely made and clearly expensive. "I thought it was time to replace those boots I bought you all those years ago." Violet laughed, tears in her eyes. "The boots you bought me 30 years ago are still in my closet. I could never bring myself to throw them away." "I know," Vincent said. "I have seen them. But now you can have 2 pairs to save. One for the young woman you were, one for the incredible woman you have become." Violet took the boots and then took Vincent's face in her hands, kissing him there on the street corner where it had all begun. People passed by and smiled at the older couple so obviously in love, not knowing the epic romance that had started on this very spot 3 decades before. They returned to the mountains for what would be their final years together, years filled with peace and contentment. They had lived fully, loved deeply, raised good children and watched them raise good children in turn. They had seen mountains and plains, wilderness and civilization, hardship and joy. Vincent passed away at 68, peacefully in his sleep in the mountain cabin he loved, with Violet beside him. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, whispering her love to him one final time. The man who had been strong enough to survive alone in the wilderness had chosen instead to live and love, and he had made the world better for that choice. Violet lived another 5 years, spending her time between the mountains and Great Bend, surrounded always by her children and grandchildren. She taught Vera's daughter to play piano and told all the grandchildren stories about their grandfather, the mountain man who had given up his solitary life for love. She passed away at 72, sitting in the garden of her house in Great Bend, the same garden where Vincent had proposed to her so many years ago. Her children found her there, peaceful and smiling, holding one of the wooden animals Vincent had carved decades before. They buried her next to Vincent in a small cemetery near the mountain cabin, with a view of the peaks they had both loved. Their gravestone was simple: Vincent and Violet Whitmore, together always. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would visit that grave for generations, bringing flowers and sharing stories about the mountain man who had seen a woman give her shoes to a barefoot child and had found the courage to offer her new ones and his heart. It had been the beginning of a love story that spanned decades and two very different worlds, a testament to the power of generosity, courage, and love to transform lives and create legacies that never fade.